So why do they charge that much more for removing the door? It takes like 2 minutes to remove the door.
I don't know, I guess
I-
time is money in that, it takes time to put it on and take it off, so, and then if you have a couple other people waiting for you, in front of you or behind you, you slow everything up, so.
Okay.
I think it comes more fuel too, because the thing's not as aerodynamic with the door off.
Yeah, I
So
agree with you on that. Yep, that makes a lot
that's
of
probably part of it as well.
I was wondering if if the guy's insurance goes up because the door is open.
Eh,
Liability.
Could be, and you never know.
Yeah, because I know I did a shot through the front big bubble of the Robinson, and you can see the glare in that, but I was using my phone at the time. I didn't have my camera with me, so you could see a reflection in that.
Mhm.
So, but I think the circle polarizer would help on that. Then you might not get that glare, maybe the reflection.
Anybody else that would like to join the panel, just raise your Zoom hand and we'll bring you on in. We're going to start in less than a minute. All right, well, we're going to get started here. Welcome to the Digital Forum for February 2023. A place for people to get their questions answered on photography and learn about new things. Today's guest is Jim Kopnick. He's a aviation photographer, and he'll be on at 11 o'clock if everything goes right. I always keep my fingers crossed till I see him, but he should be here. He's somebody that I've known from a long time ago in a different photo group that actually dissolved, but of commercial photographers. So it'll be fun to see what he has. He has some awfully good pictures, both aviation and regular photography. He's just one of those photographers that's just a great general purpose photographer. Couple other announcements. One of them, let's see, I gotta get that window up first. Oh, sure, where'd you go? I had it all set, and of course, as soon as I started, life goes on that way, right? There is a competition that I was going to talk about. The Wisconsin chapter is part of the PSA Wisconsin chapter. It's called the PCAA competition. And of course, for some reason, I seem to have lost the window that I had up. I got the feeling that all the windows I had going, it crashed. So why can't I find a competition list here? So let me just find that quick and show it to you, because it's something people could enter. The deadline is coming up. I think it's probably tomorrow. I'm not positive, but it's the last chance to get in and be part. It's called the PCAA. The last day is the 26th.
28th, Jeff.
Huh?
I'm sorry, 26th. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, 26th. Let's see if I can get to it quick, and then I'll show it, just to get people, if you've got some images that you would like to enter.
You want me to email it to you, Jeff?
I've got it. I just took me a minute to. So here it is, the site that you can go to. And if I can, come on. Come on. I got something in the way. So it's psa-met.com /PACC-circuit. It's a circuit that Wisconsin chapter is part of. It has four sections that you can enter. It's color open, monochrome open, nature division, photo travel, and photojournalism. Anybody can enter this. If you're a PSA member and you get accepts in this, you can actually get this to go to getting points and such. But it can be a fun. It's $45 for all four, or $45 for all 5 sections, $15 for one section. You enter 4 images and it gets judged 4 different times, one by the Florida chapter, one by the Wisconsin chapter, the Metropolitan chapter, Mid-Atlantic chapter. So check it out if you might be interested in entering competitions. There are quite a few awards that are given out at this. So it is something that you could enter if you wanted to. So just wanted to give a last announcement. There's only one more day, and
And
thought
Jeff,
I'd
they really
let
need
everybody
to-
know about it.
They really need to read the rules because they're quite a bit different from WACO rules.
Right. So, anybody got questions on that? Sort of having to do everything myself today. Marty's not here, so it's taking me a little longer to get through all this stuff.
Hey, Ken, could you give maybe some highlights on some of the differences on the rules? Do we have a few moments?
The best thing to do, Brian, is just go to the PSA website for the
Okay.
competition, and they'll have the rules on that.
Okay.
There's quite a bit of differences.
Yeah, it's a lot more tighter on the nature stuff than what WACO would be. Photo travel and photojournalism are very have a lot of restrictions as well. It is on the website, on the PCAA website. There is an explanation with all the rules under the conditions of entry, and so you can go through it and see. But again, there's a certain size the files have to be, and the easiest is because there's so much stuff here. It's best to just read all the rules and go through it all. It's a shame last month we didn't have information on it yet, so we couldn't talk about it. So, anybody have questions on that or anything else?
I have a question.
Sure.
I was doing a print project for a client, generating basically files for 22 different. I created a template, so it was like 3 photos on a page. It was an unusual size. It was 12 by 7. But as I was going through, and I was doing this in Lightroom, I was generating the files to send off to a vendor. And I was just wondering, I've never done a lot of printing in Photoshop. Is it pretty much the same, or are there any advantages, disadvantages between printing Lightroom versus Photoshop?
One advantage is that you can print multiple images on a sheet in Lightroom. I always print from Photoshop because I only print one image at a time, but if you have a large sheet, a big printer, then you can line up multiple images and print them all at once in Lightroom.
Yeah, so I was doing 3 images on one sheet, one 12 by 7 sheet, creating the files for those. But can you do that in Photoshop easily? Can you do templates in Photoshop?
I don't
No,
believe, no, you
they
can
don't
do
give
it.
templates.
Well, it's a good
You'd
reason.
have to just manually lay it out in Photoshop.
Yeah, Lightroom, you create a template and then you can save it, which is nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
in
Photoshop saves the everything that you set up for a particular picture. You can save that in Photoshop. You just can't do the one where you have a whole bunch of pictures, whole bunch of images on one page.
Yeah, like a collage.
Is that what it's called? I don't remember.
Yeah, that really is sort of what you end up doing is you lay it, you pick out the size paper you're going to print on in Photoshop, and then you can then put, each layer as one of your images and arrange it on the paper as whatever way you want to, so that if you're going to cut it out then later, you can just cut it out, which works out pretty well that way. And then if you want to replace it, you just plop another layer in and turn the one layer off.
Well, so
yeah.
so if I'm doing 3 images on a sheet, so I lay it out once, and when I need to do other photos, I could just drag and drop another photo into that layer.
Yeah.
I just drag and drop and it'll go to exactly the same spot, or do I have to recompose?
You'll probably have to line it up.
Well, that's klutzy then, yeah.
Yeah, it's klutzy unless you do it as a smart layer. Then you could bring in another object to be a smart layer, smart object, and then it would put it right where the old one was. That's how we do the PSA use showcase boards, or we were. Now I think we're just dropping them in, but it's if you do it with smart objects, you can do it sort of a little more automatically, but you need to understand how smart objects work, and that gets tricky. If it's something you want to do often and it's the same size, it's simpler to do it right in Lightroom and create a template that you can just pop 3 images in on a certain size sheet of paper.
Yeah, and then just keep, so when I'm done with one sheet, go to the second sheet and just drag and drop 3 new images in, and
yeah, you can actually drag and
works. Huh?
Yeah, you can drag and drop 6 images in and it'll create 2 sheets, 2 pages. So
I
Oh,
think
that's how you create
also,
multiple pages.
yeah.
Jeffrey,
There-
can't you also rearrange and rotate the images on the sheet so that you can maximize the amount of space you take up on the sheet
Yeah.
in Lightroom?
In Lightroom.
But when you're talking about
Yeah.
doing it in Photoshop, it seems complicated. Are you talking about the same sort of lining them up when you have to increase the canvas size of the file that you're in to print multiple images on, put them on different layers? Or I'm not sure what you were talking about. Even if you did it on a smart object. Are you talking about like lining them up on the page? You make the page bigger?
So like here in Lightroom, if you go to the print module, I've got like here for printing on 8.5 by 11, I've created 4 even sized pictures, and they are well, they're oddball size because I didn't care about the size. They're 3.76 by 4.93. And I can put as many pictures as I want in there. Oh, and of course, I hit the wrong button. So if I select, say, 5 pictures, it gets you one page, and then the second page, even a partial. You can create it as a picture package, and then you can pick out standard size images to add into the package, into a picture package. And depending on the size, paper that you have, that will, let you,
But Jeff, you're doing that for the same photo, so can you do that? So like I'm creating a page with 3 unique images
right.
on each of 22 pages.
Right. So zoom to fill,
Does that
rotate
work?
to fit. Actually, yeah, the package actually uses just one image. But if you go to the custom package, then
Right.
then that one you should be able. There usually is. Where'd it go?
Yeah, try it. Show us. Yeah.
Yeah, there. Let's see. We'll just do some small ones.
Oh, okay.
Actually, the one that worked would, I know in custom pack or they're supposed to be.
I think you have to do it in custom
checkbox.
package. You have to do it in custom package.
Yeah,
to be
I think
unique
it's
photos.
custom.
If it's going to be unique photos, it has to be in custom. I learned that much.
Yeah. There.
Package is just you get multiple.
Yeah, I think
the
it's
same image. It's all the same image.
Yeah, so I guess it's contact sheet is the one that you would be using, because that one you can repeat one photo per page, or if you keep that unchecked, and then you can create. It's a little trickier. Let's see. You can change the number of rows, and then you can figure out the sizing of your cells. So,
But
you
they all need to be the same though. Yeah. Same size.
Yeah.
All cells.
Yeah. The size of the cells end up being the same. So yeah, it would. But so if you wanted to do, 3 of the same size image, you're okay. But otherwise, if you want different sizes, then you do the picture package, and then it's per picture.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. This is Tony.
Sure.
I missed the beginning because I'm out of town.
Yeah.
And are you asking Lightroom or Photoshop for this? What you're trying to do here?
Well, the question initially was, is it easier or are there advantages to using Lightroom versus Photoshop or vice versa? Yeah.
Okay.
I
Well,
worked in Lightroom, so my question was, would it be easier if I'd tried Photoshop? So far, the answer is no.
in the past, for some classes I was taking, our assignment was to do a 6-picture collage in I don't know, something by 14 inches or whatever. And I used Photoshop because I could drop in a photo, size it to fit. There wasn't any, what you're talking about. I just used a blank sheet, not a template. And I would put the photo in, size it in the area, add the photos, and I could resize them. They could be different size photos. I would have 2 horizontals, 1 vertical, 2 verticals, whatever. And then I took a thumb drive to Walgreens and printed on the sheet. if we're at home, I could show you what I did. But it was not using smart objects. I think it was layers, but it's been like 8 years. And so it wasn't a template I was using. It was just dropping in photos and sizing them one by one to fit in so I could get 6 photos in.
Well,
So
again,
that's-
Tony, my scenario was I was creating, I had to create 22 files, all same size, and with working in 100 and over 100 different images into those 20 some pages. So I was looking for a way to speed that
So
up.
were you doing like a book or?
No, I was basically creating 12 by 7 sheets that they were going to insert in a book.
Okay, so, all right. Okay, I'm caught up and I'll just let you know what I had done.
Brian, what size paper were you going to print on then? 11 by 14?
12 by 7.
Oh, so you were just going to print a borderless print at 12 by 7.
Yeah. And actually I was creating the
Oh.
files to set up the nation's photo. Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, I've got one set up if you want to share this, me to share the screen.
Okay, sure. Here, let me stop and go ahead.
So this was a template that I had, Brian, that already had spaces for 3 different photos. And then you can just, drag any photo you want in there. So that you get your 3 photos.
Yeah. That's what I did, Ken. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you were there in the beginning, but I created
Yeah.
a template in Lightroom, for various templates. So one I used most was 3 rectangular, 3 landscape photos on a page. And then I just kept dragging and dropping just like you're doing.
Okay. I think that's the easiest
Yeah.
way to go, Brian, overall.
So
Yeah,
when
like-
you're doing this in Lightroom, how do you specify the rendering intent? And is it the same for all of the pictures in your template? There must be something on the right side there where you specify.
Well, it's actually taking the picture and making it fit the, like if I put, let's grab one. If I
Well,
put a
so-
horizontal here, it's not gonna fit that well. There is a way that I can, get that to fit properly, but,
But what I'm
Yeah.
asking is not about the size or the placement. I was asking about the rendering intent, which affects the color of an image. And so if you use 3 different images on a page, can you specify, I guess you'd have to specify somewhere there, the rendering intent, which would apply to all of the pictures on the page.
Yeah, because it would all be printed out the same way. So if you were going to print it on your own printer, you just go to print just like you would individual images, but you're printing it as one whole set of images.
You're printing as a
Um,
sheet. Yeah, that sheet.
Yeah, you're
becomes
printing it as a
file.
sheet.
So
can
is
say-
there,
So you can,
so is there a dialogue that comes up when you go to print it? And then you can, like in Lightroom, I mean, in Photoshop, it has all the things to select the printer profile and, all the
Yeah.
different stuff.
yes. So Jeff, go to printer. Go to
oh,
printer.
right
Yeah.
here, you can see, print resolution, print sharpening, print
Color.
adjustments if you want to add more brightness to it or more contrast to it.
But a lot of the settings are, you have to click printer for most of the settings.
Yeah. And then,
Click printer, Ken,
Yeah,
and then go into properties.
right.
Now this is where it gets a lot of fun.
Yeah, but that's not a Lightroom dialogue. That's
no, that's your printer. It's your printer dialogue.
right for your windows?
So
or-
like here, I usually use ultra premium paper glossy, so that's what I would set that for. I can change the quality to high if I want.
Change the size up on document size and all that.
Yeah, yeah, and you got all your printer sizes, paper sizes here. So if I want
But you want to make sure that you keep it the same size as what you created that template at, otherwise
right,
you
you'd
run
have
into a
to
problem.
almost add your size here.
Well,
And
that's kind of interesting because in Photoshop, you can use this dialogue when you go to print, but all of that information is in Photoshop itself. It has the print dialogue in Photoshop. You set up the color space and you tell it to ignore, what's the term? To ignore the printer.
Yeah, he does that in the lower right-hand corner of Lightroom. You have the color management section where you do tell it the paper profile that you want to use and the intent, which is perceptual. And then the rest of all that stuff transfers over, and then you set up the printer like you would normally do in Photoshop. So
Yeah.
once you go to print, it's the same process after you go to
Yeah.
print.
I see. I got it. That makes sense.
Sometimes it can be easier to do it in Photoshop, and sometimes it's easier to do it in Lightroom. So it depends on the project, Brian, on what you need as a result. So if it's something you can standardize, Lightroom tends to work pretty decent. Sometimes though,
I was able to do everything I needed to do. It was just so I created one file at a time and for all 22 files. And once I had the template set up, it was pretty neat. Went fast.
Yeah.
I just had to keep track of the photos that I already used so I didn't use them again, or just make sure I had used all the photos.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys used to have more settings than I have when I have to print for my printers.
When you go back into shoot it,
Depends in Windows.
Yeah, that's why.
when you go back into printing here in Lightroom, you can't, everything that you're setting right now in that dialogue, you can't save that in Lightroom for that. Well, can you save it to the template?
yeah,
Because-
I can save all that.
Well, the
That use
Lightroom.
that in the printer?
Okay.
Yeah, you save that in the printer part. You can save it as a preset.
A printer preset?
That includes
Yeah.
the information you're putting into the Windows dialogue? That surprises me.
No, you'd have two presets. One in the Windows dialog where you can tell it set up settings for the printing part, and then one that's set up in Lightroom. So it's two different presets. All the stuff Ken is setting, he could create and save that as a setting up where he can select settings. Right now he's got current setting, but if he goes over to the right there, you can actually save what you've done so that you don't have to go through a lot of that stuff.
Yeah,
So if you want to take a break and print a picture of somebody, a portrait or something real quick, and then go through all these settings, you could save it for that picture and then go back and start printing, and you open this dialog and the settings are saved for that, for the one like cards.
That printer dialog, it would just be saving the settings for the printer. So as long as your print, like Ken prints on a certain type of paper, ultra premium photo
yeah, it's
paper,
ultra luster premium
yeah.
is this one. So I just made a template for that.
Yeah.
Okay, then when it comes to like this one with 3 images on, I can save that as a template too. So I can go up here, I think, to the plus sign, and I can name this three image
Play.
and then create, and now I've got under my user templates, I've got the 3 image one. So that takes care of this part of it. And then the printer, I can just, when I go into properties, I can just select the 8.5 by 11 that I just made. It's got all my settings here. I do not do color adjustments. I don't want the printer to do my color adjustments, so I have mine set to custom. And as you can see, I had my printer turned off because I need to get some ink for it.
So that's
Yeah.
interesting. That looks like they're, that using Photoshop might be, there might be an advantage on the Photoshop side, because Photoshop saves all that information with the picture. And so I can go and print a picture and it saves the settings as long as you save the file. And then you get out, you go to another picture and it remembers all those settings, what size and everything for that particular picture.
Yeah, normally what I do is, this is what I would do on all my photos, and then I just go and instead of letter, I would go and choose a different, like here, my printer, the largest it can handle is 13 by 19. So if I'm doing a 13 by 19, I just change my properties of that, hit OK. Brian could do one for 12 by 8 or whatever his was, 12 by 7, I believe. And then once you got it set up, it's gonna print on that paper for everything that's in the print module. Oh, no, I hit print on it. That's all right.
By the way,
Considering you
so
don't have the printer on it, shouldn't be a problem.
No, I did turn it on, but
Oh,
so just everything Ken is showing you is for the Epson. I print on Canon, and so those dialogues are very different.
yeah,
They're printer specific.
right. That's true too. So yeah, each type of printer that you have is going to have a different printer dialog box, but you would end up and Mac and Windows does it a little differently as well. But even with Photoshop, you still have to do some printer settings, but a lot of it is also in Photoshop too. You're right.
and Lightroom comes with many different templates here. I'll go over them, but you can see that there's all kinds of templates that come with Lightroom.
Yeah.
And I've got some from Kelby.
Yeah, I got a bunch of them, and I've created a bunch that I use for, like, booklets, proof booklets. When I used to print proof booklets for portraits, I have a whole system set up for that. Actually, that 4-up one that I showed was for a proof booklet. But and then you can also, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, also, I was going to say that if you want, you can also change, instead of printing it to your own printer, you can save it out as a JPEG file to take to a printer as well. So if you didn't want to print it yourself, you can save them out.
Right, that's what I did.
Yeah,
with
right
my
here where it
22
says
with my
print
22
to here in
files.
printer. See where it says
Yeah.
under print job, print to and printer, if you print JPEG, it'll create a JPEG file of this particular image with the three photos on it.
That's what I had to do.
Yeah,
It was interesting that 12 by 7 size seemed to be very unique. I only found 3 national printers that did 12 by 7s. Allied didn't do 12 by 7.
it's not a standard size by any means. 8 by 12 is your standard size. 7 by 12 or 12 by 7, yeah, is pretty odd. But
Keith has a question to change the subject a little bit. He's asking about editing a file and talking about editing a raw file. It's kind of a long little paragraph there, but it sounds like
yeah,
someone told him if you're editing raw files in Lightroom, the edits do not go into the file, Keith. The edits go into the catalog. If you're opening a raw file in Photoshop, you're going to get the camera raw dialog. And then you can go in. I usually, when I bring files from Lightroom into Photoshop, I usually save them as PSDs. And so your raw file is still unaffected by that. But in Lightroom, if you're making edits to the file, you're not editing the actual raw file. You're editing the picture that is still saved. The raw file is still saved on your hard drive, but the edits are in Lightroom in the catalog.
yeah.
You're giving
That's right.
directions of what to do with that raw file in Lightroom.
Pardon?
You're giving when you click and do editing in Lightroom, it's storing your directions of what changes you want to make in a separate file, but it still remains a raw file.
The edits themselves are stored in the catalog. And if you do a lot of editing in Lightroom, it makes your catalog bigger and bigger. But you're right, it's just instructions on what to do with the file. It isn't actually affecting the file.
Right. And Keith, you're right. The instructor was wrong because you don't need to duplicate the raw file. If you go into Photoshop, it's going to create a second file if you have a raw file. If you go to Photoshop, it reads the instructions, or when you open the raw file into the raw editor in Photoshop and make those adjustments, it puts those adjustments in the raw file, but it's not anything baked in. It's just extra metadata. That's what the XMP file would be next to the raw file. And then when you open it, though, and go into Photoshop, then it turns it into a new file that's probably, depending how you save it, a PSD, a TIFF, or a JPEG, and then it's baked into there. So, yeah, the leader's not right in saying that once you open up a raw file, it's baked into the raw file. No, it's not. It's the information's there, but it's just an XMP file. If you threw the XMP file away, it would throw away all those adjustments as well.
Yeah, I think that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's the sidecar
XMP
file.
The sidecar, right?
Yeah.
And you have a choice. I think there's a preference in photo to whether to create XMP files. I did years ago, and I never do anymore. I just keep the stuff in my PSD file.
Yeah, once you turn it into a PSD or any other file other than raw, then it's baked in. But if it's a raw file, either Lightroom will save it, or the best way is to save it as an XMP file. That way, if you open it in another program, say, if you did all that in Lightroom and you wanted to open it just in Photoshop and not use Lightroom at all, then the XMP, Photoshop reads the XMP file, does those instructions to open the file up through the raw converter.
Are those XMP files, can they be used in other products, do you know, besides Adobe, Lightroom, and Photoshop?
Well, yeah, the camera's own raw processor can open those a lot of times. Because they're just instructions on the adjustments. And that's why a lot of people convert to DNG, because then you don't have that separate sidecar file, because then it's built all into the DNG file,
Yeah,
which is
the
the way I rather
sidecar is
do it.
made from Lightroom, right? That's what I said
Yeah.
Photoshop, but it's Lightroom. Another thing you can
Yeah.
do in Lightroom is make what's a virtual copy of the raw file, and you can make different edits and all that information you can have. It looks like two copies in Photoshop, but the raw file is still the raw file.
Right. Yeah. The raw file is always the raw file. And yeah, so I'm not sure why. I can't think of or any reason that you would need to duplicate the raw file, because if you open a raw file in Photoshop, it's going to create a new file. And when you save it as either a TIFF, PSD, then everything's baked in. The raw file's still there, and just has whatever adjustments you made in the raw converter. So hopefully that's, I would say, Keith, that you were right and the instructors are wrong. And that happens once in a while. Some people learn things different ways and get hooked on it.
Yeah, the only time I make
hopefully-
a copy of a raw file is when I'm making a backup.
Yeah. And
And for me, the only thing I do is I copy any type of work. I've been burnt in the past. I always work on a copy version, because for some reason, if my computer crashes, I've had it where somehow it deleted the original file. Then I lost everything. So from there on, I've always copied, and sometimes I work on a copy version of a copy version. Because I've had it too many times in the past where somehow I messed up, or the computer messed up and it deleted my master copy. It's like I don't even touch my master copy. I always work on a copy version always.
Are you talking about Lightroom or Photoshop?
And any picture, whether it's raw or whatever, I always work on the copy version, because sometimes I've had in the past where somehow it deleted my master picture.
I don't know why. it would,
I'm not sure why it would do that, but
Because I remember the
Yeah.
time when I was setting up my Squarespace, I lost almost 280 hours worth of work in that. Thank God I could go back to my original copy. Somehow it wound up in my recyclable bin. It's like I never put it in a recyclable bin. So something
Yeah,
happened
well-
major, major.
yeah. When I work on say websites and that, yeah, I actually take the raw file and I'll put them out on a size JPEG that I know I can use for that. So yeah, I just keep when I work on websites, I normally keep files separate and keep them in a folder in case I have to redo. And I broke that habit. Now I'm paying for it when I want to recreate a new website. So
Yeah, I'm in the process of kind of doing that myself, making sure all the pictures that were on my website or that are on my website right now, is I'm trying to put them all together.
yeah. Keep a separate folder in case you have to ever redo the website.
Eric
let's-
is asking about where to send a print, and we had a conversation about that for like a half an hour, I think, didn't we, Jeff, a couple months ago?
Yeah. I send my stuff out to Bay Photo in California. They do a really nice job of doing prints from your files, and they can do, I think we talked about that, just about every type of surface to print on that you can think of, from wood to metal to acrylic and regular photo prints, canvas prints, the whole works. There are other places, and my mind goes blank.
You got American Color Imaging, you got
Yeah,
Photo, and then MPix, which is their consumer version of Miller Photo. You got White House Color, you have Nations, you have, and the list goes on and on.
Thanks, Marty.
A lot of
I
the,
only use the one lately, so.
a lot of the beginning photographers that printed when I was a member of a print club in California, they would take it to Costco because it was fairly low cost. You could learn to set up the color profile for their printers and stuff like that. You could download their color profiles, and they don't have in the store. They don't have the print shops anymore.
Actually, they shut that whole system down, Gemma.
But you can still send it in, send your image in and get it printed, I
It
believe.
now goes to a new company that does it separate from Costco.
Oh, okay.
I forget who it was. Can you remember? You probably got that notice too.
Me?
No, Ken used to send stuff to Costco. He's muted though. And
Oh,
No, I print everything myself, and then if I get something big I want to print, I used to go with Jeff, and now I go with Bay Photo.
yeah,
Yeah.
I do too.
but you had used Costco. Did you get that notice where they shut down all their own printing stuff and they're outsourcing it? I can't remember the company that they're using, but
Yeah,
yeah, Shutterfly.
Shutterfly is it. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, Shutterfly is now doing it for them. So
Talking about Bay Photo, Jeff, though, one thing that I was a little unhappy with was the fact that I went through a dialogue with them talking on the phone about getting the right color when they printed things that weren't quite the way I expected. And they said, well, send us a guide print. And I started doing that. And it made the pictures come out perfect, but they charged $20 for that. An extra
Wow.
$20 if they have to adjust the color according to your guide print. I discussed it with them, argued with them that they should be doing that for free because they're guaranteed that they're not going to have to reprint or something that way. And it would be to their advantage, but they said it takes longer, so they charge for it.
when I send stuff to Bay Photo, I make sure my screen just gets calibrated, so I know the color is right on the screen, and I just send it to them, and then I let them adjust the color. And the last stuff that came back from them just came back perfect every time. So
Yeah,
generally, I don't need to send a guide print along. I just have to send it to them.
And I don't even calibrate my monitor, and I get great stuff back from them just using lab color. So, yeah, I don't know what to tell you, Drama, but
I
Yeah.
sent a metal print to them for an exhibition this past summer, and I printed it. It was about 40 inches wide, and so it was a big, expensive print. And I checked off for them to adjust it, and it came back very different than what I had seen on the screen. But I actually liked it more. Their adjustments better, actually. But I still had already sent in the JPEG for the exhibition, and that's what they allowed to when the judging to get into the exhibition. And so I had to make the picture match the JPEG that I'd sent in exactly. So I had to make them reprint it, and we went through a couple of weeks of sending them a guide print to make sure it looked the same. But I did like the way that they did it. They did it a little bit darker and a little bit different color. So
Yeah.
That's funny.
but they're real good about working with you on it. I just thought the $20
Yeah.
for the guide print was.
The only thing I would say that when you get to be that picky about it, I would change your color space to sRGB so that you can see exactly what they're going to see. Because they print in sRGB and they don't print in Pro Photo. And Lightroom, you'd have to either adjust Lightroom or export the picture into Photoshop and then change it down to sRGB so you can see the color. Because what will happen is, because the color range is smaller on sRGB, some of those colors that you see displayed on the screen aren't going to show up in the print.
Right,
that
right.
can be a lot of the problem. So you need to double check that somehow, and that can help you quite a bit.
Yeah, a lot of the printers for companies, the newer printers are starting to deal with Adobe RGB. Adobe
Right.
RGB.
Yeah, Adobe RGB.
Yeah, so I'm wondering.
And even the monitors are too. So,
Yeah. I'm wondering if it's worthwhile to have a discussion with them about what printer they're printing it on and what the color profile is for that printer, because that's what we used to do with Costco and get the exact color for that printer.
well, see, that's what gets tricky, because like at Bay Photo, they have dozens of different types of printer, and that's why you're sending them a file that's an sRGB, so that it's the same file, and it will print the same on all the different printers, because they have the printers are all set up for sRGB printing, and it would actually print the same on all those printers as long as it's the way it should look as an sRGB. So,
And I guess that would get really complicated if they had some printers and they allowed some color space for one printer and another one. It would be a bookkeeping nightmare for them.
Yep. So so yeah, it's can be, tricky. So you need to, make sure that everything's in sRGB, and then you should be all right.
I think I need more calibration on my monitor to do a better job on that.
So, on Bay Photo now, whether it's sRGB or Adobe RGB are the two file formats that they will work with now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just send them.
I was using Bay Photo for color prints, yeah, on metallic prints, yes.
In fact, they say sRGB is preferred for photo paper prints, while Adobe RGB is preferred for what is it, Gilse, metal and press print materials.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, yeah, it's a little tricky sometimes, but most of the time with good images and that, I've never had much trouble with Bay Photo, but I do let them do the final adjustment, just because sometimes it might be slightly off from my computer to theirs, and usually they'll look at it and they'll match it up to what they see as on that image. So
I mean, the other thing,
just
one other
send them.
thing to remember too is, my understanding is that the spectrum, the color spectrum and all that you see on a screen is less than what's actually in that file, and then that spectrum is further reduced even when printed out. So you lose
Well,
color as you go down to your screen, then you lose more color as you go to your printer.
yeah, and part of the problem is the screen is pushing light through it, and with a print, it's reflecting off the back of it. So there's always a different look. Most of the screens now are all set for sRGB, but some of them are a step above that, in between sRGB and Adobe RGB. So depending on the quality and price of the screen, I got to admit, I run inexpensive screens. So my final stuff is all sRGB, but it works. Good.
Yeah, that question
Okay,
generated 50 minutes of conversation. Not bad.
Yeah. We do have Eric Nelson was asking, that's what we were just talking about, where to send. So I think we probably answered that and more. And let's see. Well, Eric, he's asking if they're all going to go to sRGB. That's what I do when I go to printing. I think as printing gets better, probably slowly you can go up to Adobe RGB. But again, you need to have a monitor that shows that. Otherwise, it's you don't know what the color is actually going to be depending on the quality of the monitor. And to spend the price for an Adobe RGB monitor can get to be up to near $1,000 for that screen. You can't expect it out of what I use, which is for a lot of the stuff $130 monitors. But the
As you
better
mentioned-
monitors,
Yeah, as you mentioned earlier, Jeff, I mean, sRGB has been the industry standard since forever, back
Yeah.
to TV monitors, it's always been sRGB. So whether they'll ever, like you said, go up to an Adobe or ProPhoto color space, who knows? But
yeah. The hard part is the newer printers are starting to print in a broader print gamut than sRGB. So if you print yourself, you can get some of those colors. The new Epson top-line printers print in Adobe RGB most of the time, and you pick up that extra coloration, but it's really hard to be able to adjust the color on the screen if your screen isn't set up for that as well. You're sort of guessing some of those specific colors, and it's in the greens and the reds a lot of times. So
I got an email from Bay Photo recently advertising a new layering printing, and I think it was acrylic, and it sounded from when I clicked on it, was trying to read about it, that there's a space, and then they have another, like a metal print or something underneath, and it said it brought out the best of both. I was wondering if anyone's heard of that or familiar with layering types of whatever they're printing on.
that on any email from them, but the acrylics themselves are kind of a layered. I'm not quite sure how the heck they're even really done. I mean, you look at it and like I'm looking at one on my wall, and it's like there's the glass and then there's the image, and you can tell there's a space there, but it which is one of the cool things about acrylics, is it gives it such depth.
So is
yeah,
that not, the acrylic's not solid, it's an airspace between the acrylic?
no, it's the image is adhered to the backside of the acrylic. I've got one that's a 1/2 inch thick, and the print's somehow attached on there, so that when you look through it, you get this nice look of the acrylic. I've got one that hangs on the wall, but
How do those compare to metal prints, Jeff?
I like all of them, but this is the acrylic one. You can see that the print is just adhered on the back with a black backing, but it's a 1/2 inch thick.
And I got a 3/4 inch one here, and you can see right through the acrylic.
Yep.
When you look at it,
Yep.
it almost looks like the picture's on the front, but it's not. Like Jeff said, it's adhered to the back.
Yeah. They're neat. They're expensive, but they are neat. I've got a couple of them. I've got a bunch of metal prints. I like the look of metal. I like Bay Photos. What do they call the ones that are on that thin plastic with the stretcher on it?
Oh,
That is great for the real big pictures. I've got a 2 foot by 3 footer, and
the
that
exposer,
looks just gorgeous.
yeah, the exposer, right, with the frame.
Yeah, exposer.
Mhm.
Once it pulls the image tight, I have people that think it's a metal image or something. They go up and they touch it, and it's, you can move it, but it's been up for over 2 years, and it works out really well.
What's
So
the
a lot
medium-
of that stuff.
What's the
Is that a
medium
gold-
that's printed on, Jeff? the medium?
It's a
No,
polyester base on the back.
Okay.
And it's just printed on it. And then there's, on each corner, there's clips that then this frame just pulls it tight.
Is it matte or is it glossy looking?
You can get it in both glossy and matte, I believe. I use matte because I'm a matte person. I don't like
Vivid,
glossy prints.
radiant satin are the two finishes. Vivid and radiant satin.
Ah, okay. So, oh, it's a neat system. And then if you want to change it, you can take one down, you roll it up, store it away in a tube, and put the next one up for the same size. And it takes up a lot less space than prints do. I'm real happy with that exposure system. And very lightweight, easy to carry. So, okay. Eric, also the archival papers, almost all the inkjet ones that are out there these days are archival. They don't fade generally near as much as the old in the old days. So if you're printing on archival papers, and that's most of Epson papers and a lot of Canon papers, they're all will give you about 100 years, I think. Unless you use the real cheap papers, you got to stay with good quality ones. And the printers work a lot easier than they used to in the old days. That's for sure.
Oh, Jeff, Diane's asking about those images where you stretch. I forget what they're called.
Oh, the exposure. Yeah, you just put one nail up and it just sits there. The 2 foot by 3 foot probably doesn't even weigh a half a pound. I mean, it's very lightweight, so you just need one nail in a wall. Now, at a gallery or something like that, that could be a little trickier because it does need to hang from a nail.
And what kind of a hanger on the back of the picture? I mean, what's it hanging on?
There's a frame that pulls everything tight. I'll try to remember next month, and maybe I can bring. I've got one here, but it's too big for me to pull down, and I've got a smaller one somewhere that I can show the back of it and everything. But it's a spring frame unit that pulls it taut, and then there's just a hook on the back that you hang it up on the wall.
So it's
if you go to the Bay Photo site, they show exactly how it all works too.
So it's easier to ship than a regular.
Oh yeah, a
photo.
lot easier. It comes in a little triangular tube by the one size, like a 2 foot by 3 foot would be a 2 foot tube.
Mm. Oh, thanks for mentioning that. I've been having a problem that I usually ship things in round tubes when I roll them up and ship prints. But there's some that I've wanted to ship with for some gifts and stuff for Christmas and that sort of thing that have the frame and glass there. But I'm hesitant to ship glass. But this might be a good way to send pictures to relatives and stuff and have them just stretch it.
Sure. Okay. We're going to get on to Jim here. I see he showed up. Thanks, Jim, for coming. Long time no see. I knew Jim from back in the WIPA days. At that time, I think you were still shooting for EAA, weren't you?
I believe I was, yes.
Yeah. So it's been a long time, and I thank you for coming.
Thanks for asking me.
Could you tell us a little bit of your history? My morning got screwy, and I don't have it in front of me. So.
Oh, that's fine. I started out at the Oshkosh Northwestern newspaper, and I'll actually use years here since I'm not trying to hide my age, but I started out as a correspondent in 1979, and it was more for taking pictures, but they had me writing, and I kind of moved up to assistant regional editor and finally to an actual photographer position. And when EAA moved from Hales Corners to Oshkosh, I went over and became chief photographer at EAA in 1984. And I was there for 28 years and then started, well, I've kind of had my own freelance business from the beginning, but then I went totally freelance in 2012. And that's pretty much what I'm doing now. I've got some corporate clients. I am an ambassador for Sigma lenses and just kind of having fun with it now.
That's great. That's great. I know with WIPA, we came up to EAA a couple times, and I've seen a lot of your shots. You've got some great aviation shots. So that's why I thought, well, I'll give you a buzz. I wasn't sure if you'd remember me or not, or even be wanting to talk to me, since I think I was one of the few people that tried to kill WIPA early on. So
I will say, going back to what you said, interesting that I became pretty good at aviation photography, but my heart has always been photojournalism and people.
Oh, okay.
Which is why working for Sigma, I kind of pretty much get to do what I want to do. But I just find it ironic that I pretty much made my name in aviation, and airplanes. I don't fly airplanes. Don't impress me all that much. It's more people.
Sure. And I know when you sent some photos, the photos you have of people are just super. Oh, well, all your photos are great. The stuff I've seen, and I've always liked the aviation stuff. And it's funny because I started out as a newspaper photographer myself and got into different things. Fortunately, I ended up with a camera store, which made life different for me. But it's amazing how things go and what you like to do. So yeah, it's interesting how you got started. I never really knew all of it. I got to know you a little bit with WIPA, and that was sort of a short time and a long time ago.
Yeah, it was. I should add that, with the photojournalism seed in me, or whatever you want to call it, fire, I guess maybe is a little better choice of a word. But I've started out my career with the Northwestern in Oshkosh. And after I left EAA, I got hired on for the Northwestern as a freelancer again. So I kind of did, that kind of came around full circle. And I did that for a couple of years. But to be honest about it, if you follow newspapers and Gannett, it's not the best word for most photojournalists. And they ended up firing the local chief photographer, and we had two stringers for them, two local people. They didn't use us for 6 weeks, I think, or almost 2 months.
Wow.
And I just said, you're not covering our city. This is enough. So I quit Gannett. And I do a little work for the Oshkosh Herald is a new weekly that we've had for a couple of years, and they're really doing a good job bringing local news back. And I do sports for them, and it's kind of nice still having my foot in the newspaper business a little bit.
Sure. Oh, that sounds neat. Yeah. Yeah. That way you get to do a little bit of everything, and sports can be fun and that. So neat. So my mind is going all over the place today. So, so do you have anything you want to show us, some pictures, or
no, I don't want to
talk a little bit.
No, I'm done.
No, you're done. Okay.
Just teasing.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah. No. Do you have a presentation? I mean, I didn't get to talk to you as much as I usually like to talk to people before we get started. I don't know.
I don't have actually, I don't have a presentation. I know I sent you pictures, but I can pull those up on the screen and just go through.
Yeah,
them.
You want to throw some, let's see some of your work. And it doesn't have to be all aviation, but because I think some of the other stuff you sent that I didn't show everybody, we sent out an email showing a lot of your stuff, so
right.
Yeah.
I'm just going to pull this up in the bridge, and I should be able to do this.
Yeah.
There is no, let's see, let's get rid of that. there's no chronologic order to this really, so this will bounce around a little bit. Whoops, trying to figure out how to, all right. I just need to share screen,
Yeah,
and we're looking at this one.
and depending on whether you have one or two screens, there you go.
I'm just
Yep.
on one, and if I hit that, all right, are you seeing
Yeah,
picture of a
yep,
car?
we're seeing Montello Theater.
Okay. And like I said, this is going to bounce around on the timeline, so I apologize for that. But this was, like I said, I've always had that little photojournalism thing in me. And I shoot for Ripon College. I was for a while shooting for the Visitors Bureau in Oshkosh. I do that for Fond du Lac and downtown Oshkosh. And I'm trying to think of all my, and corporate clients that are local, but that's something that a client's asking for specific. So this was, the pandemic had started and I was cooped up for, I can't tell you how long. In fact, a lot of us were afraid to even, can you go out and drive? Is that a problem? So anyway, once I finally got out of the house, I had to take some pictures. So I thought I'd start this little, self-assignment on what the pandemic was to me, what I felt and how I could represent it in pictures. So I did a drive to Montello. I live in Oshkosh, by the way, and so a little bit west of me, and was looking for actually there's waterfalls there. There's a little park, so I thought, well, I'll shoot the waterfalls. It'll give me something to do. And while I was getting set up for that, I looked over and saw this theater, and it was getting toward dusk, and I saw the close sign, and it's like, how symbolic of what's going on. So I figured, sometimes I fall into some of the pictures I really like by accident, or I'm looking for something else, and then I see, something that seems more important. So I thought I'd shoot this, and it just seemed to make more sense to show cars blurred going by rather than just a totally still picture of, or everything frozen in focus. So I put my camera on a tripod and just did the few cars that were passing by. And it just sort of, said something to me with this, and decided black and white looked better for this. In fact, as I went through this, I decided to do everything in black and white. And I tend to convert a lot of pictures to black and white. This is in New York, and I have went there for, I think they don't call it that anymore, but there was Photo Plus Expo, and I've gone to that since one of the first ones, which would have been back in I almost want to say the late 80s or early 90s. I went to New York with a couple of photographer friends. And so as a photographer, New York is just, every place you look, you can see a picture. And I ran into this guy playing sax, and he's not homeless. He's a jazz musician, but he just likes playing, and he'll be on Fifth Avenue. And, depending on your timing, every time I've gone back, I've run into him. And I thought this was one of the better pictures I did. The color picture was all right, but again, I just happened to like the black and white feel and the feel of a city.
Sure.
This is another saxophonist, but it's not the same one, I don't think. But this was in Central Park, and we were there for the photo expo, and then, my favorite time was when I could get out of the Javits building and just go take pictures. And this is in Central Park. The saxophonist they have tunnels on some of the walkways, and he's in the tunnel, which is why he's a little darker. And as we walked through, I looked at it with him lit, and it was interesting. But as we passed through and I looked back and saw him silhouetted with the tourists in the background, it just seemed to say, this is the better picture. This is the better view. And
Wow.
Talking about lenses too, if you don't mind me jumping around on stuff a little bit.
No, that's
I'm
fine.
kind of an equipment freak and try to have the best lenses possible. and this is, I'm trying to think, I think I had just sort of signed on to Sigma, and they asked me to shoot with their 18 to 300 crop sensor lens. And it's like I think they still sell it, I'm not sure. But it's a $400 lens. It's pretty cheap, but it's pretty sharp, and it's really versatile when I travel. And I sold mine to a friend that was starting out in photography, and last year I thought about it. It's like, I really miss having that lens. So I went and bought another one, because it's just, like I said, it's so versatile traveling. It becomes I got to do my math here, a 27 by 450 if you put it on a full frame camera, which is most of my cameras, or actually all my cameras are full frame. So it makes like I said, a great travel lens, a great journalism lens, just because of that wide range. And I tend to like telephoto work more. So, this is, as much as I want to say I have the best equipment, this is a $400 lens, and it really got me some nice pictures on that trip.
Well, it's seeing that lighting and getting them backlit like that really makes that photo, especially with the edge lighting on him.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, could I set that up if I wanted to do a picture like this? Would I think of all that stuff? And I think, the photo gods just shine down on us sometimes. And, it's when you have your mind set on, this is going to be the picture, and then all of a sudden you walk away and look at it from another angle, and it's like, oh no, this is the picture now.
Yeah.
It's sometimes it's good to free your mind. It's funny, as I look at this, I can see why I didn't do it, but 2 points. I look at this and I wish I would have cropped the hand out on the left-hand side. I just don't like seeing the hand and part of that person there alone. But what I did was, I didn't want to lose the top of the guy's head, and I didn't want to lose the bottom of the saxophone. But that brings up something I do when I give seminars for Sigma, and I talk about cropping, because when I started at the newspaper, I don't know if anybody remembers Steve Pyle from the Associated Press, but back in the 70s and 80s, he was, fantastic photographer out of AP in Milwaukee. And he came up and talked to us in the newspaper about cropping, and how space is limited. So you want to get all the elements in something, and you want to get rid of everything distracting. And what he would have done, well, we printed in column sizes in those days, but I find that a lot of times I fall into this 2x3, 3x2, whatever format our cameras are giving us our pictures in. And it's like, there's no rule that says you can't. I do most of my work in the Bridge and Adobe Camera Raw before I go into Photoshop. Nothing says you can't click the little lock button and unlock it, and just pull the left side in a little bit until it looks good to you, until you get rid of that distraction. And the idea works really well with horizontals, I think, where do we need all the sky in that picture? Can we make that more horizontal and have it be a stronger image? And the same with this. Could I have just, pulled in the left a little bit? Probably could have pulled in the right too. Not worry so much about the rule of thirds, but just make it a picture that I like, and think it's less distracting on the left. So just some personal thoughts.
Yeah.
All right. Some of my aviation work. One of my corporate clients is Cirrus Aircraft, and I was lucky enough for quite a few years to, as they introduce new models, they'd want to shoot a lot of them in Florida. So I traveled to Florida. The photo pilot that I've had for 30 some years lives in Florida. So it worked out really good to go down and meet him, and then meet the Cirrus group and go shoot what they wanted. And again, in so many pictures that, I will show you in this, as well as like all the time, is I'm off to shoot one thing. We were off to, this is over Miami Beach, above the clouds, but we're trying to get out over the Atlantic a little bit and shoot back at the city. And as we're doing this, the sun broke and the planes just look beautiful. I wasn't planning on this shot, but I yelled at my pilot, he's got a window that opens up so I can shoot forward. And I said, open your window. Here's the shot. And you know, did a little bit of opening up the shadows on this, since otherwise it would be pretty backlit. But it's just, and this is one of my favorites, and that's the thing. You want to please the client, but I'm always trying to please myself too. Did I achieve something I liked artistically? And in this one I did.
Yeah. Now, how do you get the props so that they are not showing up as frozen? That's always been my biggest problem. Is it's a shutter speed setting?
It's a shutter speed setting. And when I shoot air to air is a little easier. I mean, it's complicated in that you need a photo plane and a photo pilot that's trained in formation and all the safety, briefing and knowledge and to put this whole thing together. But all you need is a shutter speed of a 60th of a second. And with cameras that are doing, most of them do your shutter speeds in thirds or your third stops. So sometimes you can pull off an 80th of a second. You just look on the screen in the back and make sure you don't have any gaps. But that's pretty much the rule of thumb for most aviation, air-to-air aviation work, is 1/60th of a second. And to get that, to make, have images that are sharp, you need smooth air. I've used a gyro stabilizer at one time. They're expensive, they're clumsy. They sort of work, but if the air isn't smooth, the other plane is bouncing around too, just as much as you are. And so the stabilizer may help a little, but you're spending a lot of money, that you may not need if you just keep climbing until you find some smooth air.
Yeah.
The other thing is lenses these days and in-body stabilization are, really a benefit to a lot of us too. So basically I found it easier. It's just more maneuverable to not use an external stabilizer, to just use what's in the lens, or if it's working with the IBIS and the camera, do that. And you're playing the odds, even when it's really smooth, the other plane is still moving. You're in continuous autofocus. You're not in single, you're in continuous, so it's always changing focus. But you're sort of still playing the odds. Are all these things going to come together and give you a sharp picture?
Yeah. That is definitely a neat picture. Now, so you said you're shooting through a clear, through an open window, right?
An open window. I try never to shoot through glass or plexiglass unless I have to. I always try to find airplanes we can raise a window. In this case, the plane I'm in, we take the baggage door off. And so then I've got a pretty big opening that I can shoot from for shooting sideways or backwards. And in the case where I have to shoot forwards, the pilot opens his window all the way and gives me the ability to shoot forward a little bit.
Yeah.
The downside is you're shooting, it's not like you never put your camera outside the airplane because the wind is just too strong. The wind is at whatever speed the aircraft is flying at, which is at least, 130, 150 miles an hour. Sometimes less, sometimes more, but I mean, it's a lot. But there's still air coming in the window when you open it up. So you've got a little bit of buffeting. You will notice on this, I'm thinking on the plane on the left, the prop is, I was going to say, like, it's almost like a bow tie, it's not a full circle. If you look at, especially I can see the left, but I need that faster shutter speed to overcome the wind buffeting that I'm getting with the window open.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
The nice thing is,
no, I did. Yeah.
I was going to say, shooting backwards, props are black on the side facing the pilot. So you're not seeing, it's helping. You can see a little bit of a blur, but it's helping that the fact that it's the back of the prop is black and it's backlit. So I think I've got one in here that's going to show you from the front and you can see the difference.
Sure.
All right, we're jumping around here. Also in the pandemic though, one of the other clients that, and I volunteer for this, I have clients and jobs that I do obviously for money because I've got to make a living. And there are a lot of things I do just because I want to give back. And this is Old Glory Honor Flight out of northeastern Wisconsin. So it's all in my area, basically a little bit north of Green Bay and south. And during the pandemic, a lot of the veterans were holed up just like we all were. And so we did a thing. We went to different cities and took pictures of the veterans. And some of it was just to, they brought little gifts to them. And if they were in a home or even living in their own home or apartment or something, a little something to cheer them up. And it gave me, and then we wanted to post pictures of them on social so that their friends and family could see them too. Everything, and during something like this, was at a distance. So we went to this guy's house to take a picture of him. And normally we'd open the door, have him stand in a window. And I noticed the garage door had, it's like a window blind in the back that looks like an American flag. And what I love most about it, I was thinking, well, that'd make a good backdrop. But then having the little frames or the grid work of the window, I liked even more. So we did the pictures of this gentleman and his wife standing in the door and things like that. And then I said, can you go in the garage, stand next to the window? And I was hoping for some reflection, but not too much. I wanted that feeling that you're through the window. And so I had him maneuver a little bit. So I got it so I could get his face and his eyes as clear as possible, but you can see some of the ghosting and reflections, especially to this. And, this is one of my favorite portraits. And what I don't do a lot of Photoshop work, especially if it's an editorial job. I'm not going to do any outside. I mean, exposure contrast, take out dust spots or something like that.
Right.
But I'm going to pretty much do what I did in the darkroom back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, with maybe a little vignette around it and some burning and dodging and things like that. But in this case, this was more of a PR job for a client. So what I like to do in cases like this, I was trying to keep my image out of the picture too. So I just backed off at an angle a little bit and shot them. And then in Adobe Camera Raw, there's a little tool down toward the bottom where I can go in. I'm not sure if you all are using this. And you find the horizontals, and I just draw 2 horizontal lines, preferably top and bottom, and then do the same with vertical, and it just squares that picture up.
Yeah.
And I just thought this was a better presentation than having it just a little lopsided.
Yeah. No, that's neat.
And I'm thinking this was with a 70-200, but I love that lens. In most cases, I'll do 75% of my work with it, probably. Wide angle when necessary to show some contrast, to show a bigger picture, to get closer to something and show some background to it. But I love telephotos, and I love the 70-200 for almost all my work. This is one, actually talking about telephotos. I got to think about this for a minute. Sigma just came out with a 60-600 millimeter sport lens for mirrorless cameras. They redesigned it. And basically in this day and age, we're talking Sony cameras. They do make it an L mount for Leica and Panasonic. And surprisingly, I just read, we just came out with 3 lenses for Nikon Z mount. And from some of the articles I've been reading, it says Nikon will license third-party lenses as long as it's not competing in that focal length. So the 60-600 is a very unique lens. Sigma's the only one that has it. So I'm fingers crossed for my Nikon friends that we're going to see this lens in Nikon Z mount hopefully soon. They released 3 little lenses that they've done in other mounts, but with the mirrorless technology and how they're redesigning the lenses, it should be easy I'm sure they've got this all planned, how they can end up doing Nikon Z mount with this lens. I wonder-
I sure hope they do it. And that lens is interesting. I got the feeling we'll get a bunch of people wanting to ask you questions about that 50 to
Or 60
to 600.
60 to 600. I've got,
Yeah.
they came out with it in 2000, I think it's 18, because I've talked to people about this and done a lot of social posting. They came out with it in Canon E mount or EF mount and Nikon F mount.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think if there was another mount then, but those are the two that, DSLR mounts. And I've been using it. I'm trying to think if I was shooting Nikon back then, and I've gone through Sony and Canon, and I'm kind of shooting both Canon and Sony right now, mostly Sony, because it seems all the new lenses everybody comes out with, especially Sigma, is going to be in Sony mount at this point. Canon doesn't seem to want to let anybody play. So I'm doing less and less. It makes more sense for me to shoot the newer lenses because they're better, they're sharper, and that's what Sigma's trying to sell, and that's what I should be shooting. So in fact, I sold one of my R3s last week, and just figure until Canon, it's kind of an editorial comment, but until they come to their senses, I understand that they're trying to make as much money as possible, but on the other hand, they're not making us happy as photographers either, I don't think. So
their position seems to be a little strange, and I hope Nikon relaxes it a little bit more too. So
yeah, I agree.
It's not going to hurt them if they open it up to these different lens manufacturers. It's probably will help them. So to sell more bodies at least. But
and like I said, we have had the lens out. It's my basic air show lens. It's great for air shows because it goes to 600. It's good for the performances, the air show planes, but because it goes wider, it's great for just about everything on the ground. I can pretty much just carry that lens around at Oshkosh Adventure, and I don't need anything else. It is a little hefty. I know the new one is 5.5 pounds, and the old one is a little bit. I doesn't have more than a pound, I don't think, on it, but it's big and heavy, but it does what you need to do. And the thing is, you can use it with Sony. You can use it with an adapter, and it's worked fine with DSLR cameras. The newer one, they've added, I can't think of a linear motor for focusing, and they really improved the stabilization. And I used, you read articles on this going, well, it gives you 3 to 4 stops, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't seem to do that to me. When they sent me the sample lens in December, I'm sitting in the living room kind of playing with it and getting used to it. And, it's just the room lights on. It was dark, it was night, and it's just the lights on in the kitchen. And I go over and I'm trying to think, I had a Sony A9 Mark II, I think, for the camera. And there was a healthy living potato chip bag sitting on the counter. And I just, for the heck of it, it's like, I'm just going to take a picture. And I focus in on the name and some of the type on the bag, 40th of a second. And it was 12,800 ISO, and the lens is at 6.3, I think, when it's at 600 millimeters. And I looked at the back of the camera and it was tack sharp. And it's like, how can it do that? I sat through one of our training meetings on the lens, and at 60 millimeters, or at the wide end, it gives you 8 stops, and at 600 millimeters, it gives you 7 stops of stabilization, and that's just wild. And you're still playing the odds. We're still shaking. I'm getting older, and I shake more than I did 10 years ago. But and it's a heavy lens, and part of me thinks some of that weight helps stabilize it. But still, having 7 stops of stabilization is just unbelievable. So this picture, I shot some airplanes with it because they think it's going to be a great airshow lens, and there's no air shows going on. So I had a friend of mine fly down in Juneau and did some pictures of him landing. And it worked out good for that. But it's like, I use this lens for everything. The last few years, if you look at my social and look at what lenses I'm shooting with, this is my go-to lens for so much stuff. Just driving around, you know, I can shoot wide, I can shoot tight. So I had my friend Sarah do some modeling, and we were in a coffee shop, and I did some inside stuff, you know, with just window light, and the stabilization worked great for slower shutter speeds. And I've always had this, I love shooting through windows. I just love having the reflection, but still having that face in focus. So I went outside and shot from across the street and ended up with this. And it's one of my favorite pictures, I think, just for that. Sort of, there's a little confusion maybe going on with the reflection of the car. But I just kind of like the contrast of that, the out of focus versus the focus. And just use this to try to show the extent or the versatility of the lens. You know, I did landscapes with it. I did portraits. You know, it's good for just about everything.
Sounds like it. Sounds like it. Neat.
Another picture of Sarah from the same shoot, and this was outside. So we don't have that reflection from the glass, but it just shows you how nice it can throw the background out of focus. And one thing, you know, I never was that hot on third-party lenses. I was always one of those that was really loyal to a camera manufacturer. When I shot Nikon, it had to be Nikon everything. And when it was Canon, it had to be Canon everything. And when Sigma came out with their 50 art lens, man, I think it was like 2012, I was reading about it, and it's like, it had a really good price. But the biggest thing was, you know, here's this lens that they're saying is better than Canon or Nikon. You know, it's sharper. It was really getting a lot of play in the photo press. So I bought one, and I ended up getting the 35 too. And it's kind of this, you know, niche lens that it was kind of cool to shoot with it. And that's how I got started. As I went to Photo Plus Expo one year and ran into Dave Metz, who at one time was the head, I'd just say the head of Canon in America. I'm sure there were people above him, but he was with Pro Services. And because I worked at EAA was sponsored by Canon, so I had a long relationship with Dave. And he was working for Sigma. And he had retired from Canon and wanted to stay in the business, and ended up working with Tiffin Filters and then went to Sigma. And Dave was thinking about the aviation aspect because he loves planes. And so that kind of got me into Sigma. I became their aviation person. And that all worked out good. But before that, and before the art series, you know, I never thought Tamron or Sigma or any of these third-party lenses were really sharp. It's like, why would I pay that much money for something? I know if I buy a Canon lens, it's sharp. But I got to tell you, after reading a lot of stuff online about things too, it's like, well, Canon had some bum lenses. They had some stuff that they sold that wasn't the best out there. Nikon had some stuff, even back in the film days. There was I'm trying to think if it was a 14 to 28 zoom. They had some kind of odd zoom back in the film days. And
they had a 43 to 86.
That might have been it. But I'm trying to think, it was, at least the copy we had was a dog. It was terrible.
Yeah,
and, you know, it was like pop glass. So it's like the manufacturers don't all have, every lens isn't the best, you know, that they're putting out there. So it's one of the things that impresses me these days. And I'll say it for Sigma, but I'm sure Tamron is the same way. And I'm trying to think of what other, I mean, I've used Rokinon for stars and things like that, and they seem really sharp too. Is third-party lenses have really upped the game. And, you know, so I look at this, if you zoomed in at 200% even on her eyes, you know, the eyelashes are tack sharp. And, you know, and that's what I love about, you know, at 60 to 600, a lot of times you're giving up some stuff for that. You're giving up sharpness. When Canon came out with their 35 to 350, I got to shoot. And this was one of those little things. No one, you don't brag about. At that time there was no social media, so I couldn't brag about it to anybody. But there were 2 copies in the U.S. and George Lepp from Outdoor Photographer had one, and Dave Metz gave me the other for EAA that year so that I could shoot and get pictures of it. And I thought that was like the best lens when it came out. I thought the 100 to 400, the original one, was the best. And you look back on it now and it's like, but those images are a little soft. They're not as good as the lenses today. And, the 35 to 350, after using that for a couple of years, I gave it up. It just wasn't that good. I think we get caught up in the press of something sometimes, but I think, like, I can't think of a bad lens that's out there these days, that's really bad. Everything just seems to be so good and so sharp. So that's my little spiel on, Sigma lenses, but also Tamron, and, they're the biggest lens manufacturer in the world. And I think they're producing some Nikon lenses. So it's, not to knock the competition or say Sigma's the only one, but they've learned how to make really sharp lenses that are a little more, or they're less expensive than the camera manufacturer. And, they put it this way, I got to buy up all my stuff. I may get a discount here or there, but I buy a lot on eBay too. And this is my budget and my money I'm spending too.
Yeah. Well, Sigma's come a long way. I remember when I used to sell the equipment, their name wasn't quite as good.
Oh, I know.
Almost 40 years ago. But nowadays, them and Tamron are the 2 companies I look at periodically. And Sigma's just got so much more, and their art lenses are so nice. I know a number of people that have them. So,
I mentioned that I love the 70 to 200, and I'm using their new sport version, which I can't think of when it came out a few years ago. But the earlier version, the EX with the gold trim, they sent me one of those to try for air to air, and I got to say it was terrible. I don't know if they had a floating element or something in there, that vibration in the plane was bouncing it around or doing something, but it was just absolutely terrible. And the stabilization, I asked about it. I said, it doesn't seem like stabilization's working. And they said, you got to put it on the camera and turn the stabilization off and turn the camera off and turn the camera on. And you got to do all this stuff to get the clutch for the stabilization working. And it's like, that's way too complicated.
Yeah. Jeez, I don't know.
All right. Going back to aviation and talking about that full prop circle, here's from the front in good light. And this is a 60th of a second. And as I remember on this one, I think over Lake Michigan, this was a private job that I did for somebody a couple of years ago. But I think it was the A9 Mark II was out. I was shooting just about all Sony. And I wanted to find out if the electronic shutter was going to handle a 60th of a second. So I was going back and forth between mechanical shutter and electronic, because I wasn't sure if we were going to get some of that jello look. And this is electronic shutter, and it looks beautiful, I think.
Yeah.
Again, showing how electronics and cameras and mirrorless cameras especially are improving by leaps and bounds.
Now, how are you? I'm trying to figure out that with the lead plane, how you shot that.
This is it was in a Bonanza, and in that aircraft, it's got 2 baggage doors, a big one and a smaller one. So we have both those doors off, and they're on the right side. So I've got this huge hole in the side of the plane that I'm shooting through.
Okay.
I'm basically just sitting in one of the seats, pretty comfortable, and just I talked to my pilot on the radio. He tells the other guy, move in 10 feet, come 2 feet to the left. I can do some movement myself, and basically we're telling the other plane what to do. the one thing that, and this works with a lot of things, I think, is that I can tell the pilot 5 feet to the left and he might go 50. So you're prepared all the time. I mentioned that I'm always in continuous autofocus, and I haven't figured out exactly if I'm in tracking. Nikon has 3D. I've tried that. Sony has their tracking focus. It depends on what I want to try to have the camera lock in on, because the graphics, the color, all this stuff may give the camera a different focus point that it wants. But you have to be prepared for everything. The planes are, no one is ever rock solid up there. And then when you start a turn, maybe they can't hang into the turn. Maybe we turn into the sun and the guy can't see for a little bit, so he pulls away. There's so many variables that you just have to be prepared all the time, and take what you can get and play the odds.
Yeah. Wow. It's really interesting.
Okay, that's me with, it's because you asked for some pictures too. I was going to say,
Yep,
why is that
yep.
in there? That's with, I had just gotten, funny, I tested this when it came out, the Sigma 105 f1.4, called the Bokeh Monster because of that big front element.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
they sold it years ago when I switched from Canon to Sony, and I just decided I've got a couple of friends that are shooting with it and love the results. And so I got one in the fall, and I was so happy to get it. So I don't do a lot of selfies, photographers get their picture taken.
Yeah.
I do a lot of street photography for Sigma, especially with their wide angle lenses, and they've come out with a bunch of them. And I like to go to Chicago because it's close by, and we always take the train. It solves parking and driving in the traffic. And it also gives all these opportunities to shoot people on the train if you can. And it doesn't happen all the time, but when there's a family, especially with kids sitting behind me or in front of me, I just love the fact that they're going to lean up against the window and look out. And I think what I did with this one is tip the screen on the camera sideways so that I could see it. And then I just put the camera up by the window. So
okay.
kid didn't see my face. He watched a little bit and was trying to pose like kids will do. And I go for that. No, I want the candid look. I want the real look that he's doing as he sees the city. So I'd kind of put the camera up and take it back and have my finger on the focus button and like just put it up and wait for the moment, which is, I do it in sports. I do it in street photography, because there's always that moment when you've got the composition or the picture or something, but it's not there 100%. You need an expression, the eyes looking someplace, there's something that you're waiting for.
Yeah. Yeah.
A little more street photography this is in New York. And, I love silhouettes. I love contrast. I love, people walking versus the guy standing with the umbrella. And, going out in the rain can be a little challenging sometimes, keeping your equipment dry. One little trick I do is I'll put the camera strap over my shoulder and then put my coat on, so that the camera is basically going to stay under my coat, and then just pull it out when I need to shoot and slip it back under my coat when I'm walking. But, I love the reflections that you get from wet streets.
Yeah. It's an interesting shot.
All right, this one kind of in your face, just to, I was doing an air to air of this plane. You're flying around Lake Winnipeg or Lake Poygan, just northeast or north, what are we talking here? Northwest of Oshkosh. And I did all the basic stuff, but I had that 60 to 600, the older version, along with me. And I thought, I'm just going to see what I can do with it just for fun, because we were heading home. So I had the plane fly just a little bit above us. And this is at 300 millimeters. And I couldn't believe the sharpness I got. 300 millimeters at a 60th of a second.
Yeah, it's amazing. You can see every fin on there.
Yeah. But again,
Even the guy is sharp.
yeah. And not saying that, this is all my skill. Again, everything, at least with air to air, is playing the odds. There are going to be 10% in focus, 15% in focus. It isn't a huge amount sometimes. So you shoot a lot, you play the odds, and as I always say, you just hope the photo gods are good with you
Yeah.
and give
No.
you some presents. And it's
Yeah.
weird, but I used to think that way in the film days. It's like, there's, is there going to be one out of this roll of 36?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's it. You learn to shoot differently when you knew you only had 36 shots on a roll.
oh yeah.
You didn't just hold the button down and shoot.
Yeah, thank
I-
goodness the motor drives back then were only like 5 frames a second or something.
Yeah.
I was going to say until the F3 seemed to be a little faster, I think, but
Yeah. It's I still remember how that went. And so when you're shooting like something like this, are you shooting a short burst of images, or are you just picking your shots?
I'm shooting a short burst, and I come and go on, am I going to be in high speed? And lately I've cut it down, so I'm not in high speed. I found this thing with Canon, but when I was shooting more Canon, like air show planes, the acts with smoke and all that kind of stuff, where
Yeah.
I'd be in, high speed back. I was going to say 10 frames a second. We're not too much faster than that, but like with a 1DX Mark II or something like that. But I'd see like out of focus, in focus, out of focus, it was almost like a sine curve or something. And it seemed very repeatable. It's not like a plane would come by and I'd shoot and have 100% in focus. I might have 25% in focus. And it always bothered me. Like, is it the lens? Is it me? Is it the camera? And then I talked to a friend of mine that was shooting the same air show, and he was shooting Nikon. He said, I noticed the same thing. And then I noticed in the handbook for the Nikon D5, they're just showing, I think it was a track figure, someone running a race, and they were saying the
Yeah.
same thing, that, it's not always you're not going to get 100% in focus, that, you're going to get as much as the computer and all this stuff comes together with the lens and you're shaking and everything else. But I thought it was interesting Nikon admitted that. And so I kind of laugh a little bit when I read some of the reviews, and it's like, I shot this thing at me and shot, 75 pictures, and all 75 were tack sharp. It's like, I don't know. Not sure I
Yeah,
totally believe that. But it is what it is.
It's getting better every year, but
It is.
yeah.
And thank goodness, because we're all getting older. So
Yeah, I'll agree. One quick question here. Pat Lynch asks, what's the aperture setting that you use for the aircraft? Do you have a set aperture?
no, and that brings up a good point, and I'll tell you a mistake I make, and I'm going to try to correct this even with air show. Because I shoot time value, and I don't like to do manual, because generally there's a lot of changes between sky and ground and things like that. And I found since, back in some of the early Canon days, that evaluative metering was really good, that it really held the exposure good, even against white clouds versus ground, that it really gave me a good exposure. So I'd shoot time value and just let the aperture fall to whatever it was. It works out really good towards sunset, or if you're shooting early in the morning, because you're down in that f8 and f11 range. And I never paid attention to it being on a bright day, it's going to be at f22. And if I'd get a warning that all of a sudden it was above that, I'd raise my shutter speed a little bit. But f22, what I've learned and I've seen, and there are times I think that we know something's wrong, and we just, You know, like it's
Yeah.
a job. It's sometimes like air to air work, especially with EAA, got to be an assembly line. You know, you do 20 airplanes a day or something. It was incredible. But, you know, F-22, you get diffraction and it can soften that image a little bit. And I've thought about, I used to take a variable neutral density filter with me, but it's complicated doing that. You end up under stress, falling back to what you're used to and what's easiest.
Yeah.
And, you know, so ideally, that's why I think it just happens. We say that we're going to shoot more in the evening, early evening before sunset because the light is nicer. It's a golden hour. But I think what we don't understand is, or what happens, and we're not thinking about it, is we're getting into that sweet spot on a lens where it's f8 to f11. And we're just, you know, the sharpness is there maybe without us planning it. And so in the future, I'm really going to try to discipline myself. Variable neutral density, which I've worried, like, so if I add a filter like that, I'll get my f-stop down, but am I degrading the image with the
Yeah.
filter? The thing is, I don't know until I actually try it. And
Yep.
I've talked about it with a lot of people. Everybody technically goes, yeah, that makes sense, but no one else is doing it that I know. The other thing is when I shoot air show, and if you come up to Oshkosh, again, I'll shoot shutter priority because an airplane coming by, I started at a 400th of a second. And I do that because your aircraft, you know, they're coming, get my hand so it's showing, but, you know, they're coming by at 100 to 300 miles an hour. The jets are even faster. And so you're trying to pan with this, and it's, you know, it's kind of slow. There's got to be a name technically for this, but you know, as they're at a distance, it's sort of slower. And then as they come a beam of you, they're really going fast. And it's difficult doing that. It's difficult swinging from your hips, keeping your focus point on it because the speed seems variable to you. And so what I'm thinking of is I always try to shoot the lens wide open. And what I have been doing is I've learned, someone asked me this in a seminar, a Zoom last year on street photography, because if you look at it, especially my social postings, it's like, wow, you shot that at 5,000 ISO or 6,400 and, you know, I would just set it for something high so I could get my other figures where I wanted, because I knew the Sony cameras and the Canon cameras could handle that high ISO. And when you think about it, unless I heard you guys talking prints, so if you're making prints for something, you want something really good, but I'm basically, you know, doing all this for social. And even if it's going in a magazine, you know, the biggest it's going to be is 8.5 by 11 if it was a cover, but it's going to be inside and be smaller in a lot of cases. So, and with, I use Topaz AI noise reduction, and the stuff comes out so beautiful that, you know, I've got the high ISO cover between the camera and post-production.
Sure.
But they asked, why don't you use auto ISO? And it's like, well, it doesn't work. So I thought I'd look into it, and I didn't realize, it shows you how, I mean, I've done this for 40 some years and I try to read the manual, but there are things, again, we get stuck on our ways. And I didn't realize when I do auto ISO, I get these low shutter speeds that I didn't want. I didn't realize that the newer cameras, the higher end cameras, let you adjust the minimum shutter speed in that. And when I found out I could set it to 125 or 250, that made up all the difference. All of a sudden, auto ISO is working beautiful for me.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to do that more too. But I'm thinking, going back to this f8 to f11, that is, I'm shooting at 6.3 on the Sigma 60 to 600. That's wide open on the lens. You know, I got nothing to blur out in the background, really. I mean, it's an airplane in the sky. So why am I shooting with that? Why don't I bump that up to f11 and, you know, get the maximum, you know, sweet spot of the lens? And I know the shutter speed, then all I got to do is adjust the ISO or let it go automatic. You know, maybe I should be shooting manual with auto ISO. So that's what I'm going to try this year.
Yeah. Yeah. I know a few people that do that for certain things, and I'm more of the aperture guy, aperture preferred, but.
And I do that on the ground for just about everything.
Yeah.
You know, unless speed is involved.
Yeah.
We're coming, actually, I was going to say February 24th. I see the date on this, but it's the 4th anniversary of Old Glory honor flight going to Vietnam. And I went to Vietnam with them for 2 weeks.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was quite the photographer's experience to capture what was in the country, what wasn't in the, and the vets and everything else.
Yeah,
And
that
that's
looks like a
just-
neat shot.
There were so many pictures, I couldn't pick one. I did a photo show for it. So I ended up thinking this montage was a better way to do it. Some of the stuff at EAA, you know, not everything has to be airplanes. You know, it's people, it's in this case, the fireworks on Wednesday and Saturday night are always really big things. So it's learning to be creative on, you know, different aspects of your skill set.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of, this is the last one. You know, this is my grandniece, and she's becoming an even better model. She was scared of the camera to begin with because I used long lenses, and it was a little intimidating to her. Now she is, I won't say she's becoming a ham, but she really knows what to do. And this was at the Paint Art Center before the holidays when they were, you know, everything was decorated. And again, the candid stuff, you know, she'll pose for me and I'll give those to her mother. But the candid ones are what's going to go to Sigma and what's going to go in social. And the Paint Art Center uses stuff too. That's another place I donate my time.
Oh, okay. Neat. Yeah, it's cute.
Back to, this is some of the stuff that I do for Old Glory. This is at the World War II Memorial in Washington. And it's just looking for the interactions with people. The biggest challenge is that there's usually 100 vets sometimes, or between 50 and 100. So it's just trying to capture as much as you can with different people.
Yeah.
You know, and I hate, it's weird because we do 4 or 5 trips a year, and I hate to do the same shot every time, but since it's with different people, you know, you're going to touch somebody with it. This is at the World War II Memorial, and they're looking at the Lincoln Memorial on the other side of the reflecting pond. And again, I'm thinking, yeah, we're ending with Kaylee, my grandniece again. So that is, I'm going to stop the share right there.
Okay. I'm gonna switch us back to that. Got a couple quick questions here.
Yeah.
Any tips for shooting through a window?
The time, I actually, a couple of years ago, I was doing a job for Cirrus, and they couldn't hire a photo plane. So I was in one Cirrus shooting another, and I didn't realize I was going to have to do that. And I'm thinking, this is not going to work. But it ended up working out really good. So what I can tell you is, see if I can do this with my hands, is one, you want to shoot, you know, straight on. One, you want the window as clean as possible. So if you have the chance beforehand, at least make sure it's wiped down and it's not dirty. You know, if you know the person with the plane, there's polish they can use to make it look a little nicer. You know, so that's something you might consider too. But you want to shoot, you know, perpendicular through the glass at which you can. And I ended up finding that I try to do this with my hands. Oh, this is even weirder looking in the screen. But when I try to, you know, straight on, my pictures were sharp, but I try to shoot back, like that picture of the yellow and black plane. I try to do something at an angle, and now you're really getting the glass to distort. You know, I do this with birds out the window. I just did this the other day. I posted a picture of a cardinal that was on the feeder, and I'm shooting straight through the living room windows, you know, perpendicular to him, pretty sharp. And there was a squirrel, and the squirrel ran up the tree. So I had to go to the side, and I'm shooting the window at a diagonal. Squirrel was all out of focus. So, you know, that's a big one, is anytime you're shooting through glass, as straight on as you can. The other thing is you can get reflections. So what I tried to do was I wore black clothes. I have black silk gloves that I can wear so that that cuts the reflection down. You still end up getting your face. I haven't got to the point of using a black ski mask yet, although I could see that working. There are people that even tape off the camera name on the front because you can end up getting that. I find some of that little stuff, if it's bad, I can clean up in Photoshop, and
Yeah.
it's then it's not looking so bad. But they make these rubber like lens hoods. There's a company called Curved. I think it starts, I don't know if it's with a K or a C, that makes these. And I bought one for this job I did a couple of years ago, and I find them too collapsible. I think if you were going to shoot a storefront window or something, and you used one of these, and you could put up, to the window, and maybe that would be fine. It didn't work for me at all.
Yeah.
With what I was trying to do, it didn't have enough rigidity to it, and so it's kind of buyer beware on those. Although they're not that expensive, and I don't want to say that I have a problem, but I see all these things online. I see Instagram ads, and I got to tell you, I buy them all. What photographer can't use another toy or use another tool? Tool is a better word. It works better with my wife to say I had to buy this photography tool than I saw this little toy I wanted on Instagram. So,
it's a little addiction. All this,
it is.
all this technical stuff. Here, this is going to be this is a tricky question. We have a photographer that does wet plate photography, sort of like traditional tintypes, and he's interested in doing historic open air aviation. So he's tethered to a dark room for processing in the field, and he's in central part of the state, Marshfield area. Can you tell him of any good areas that he might be able to go and photograph aircraft?
I'm
just on land, he says too.
Okay. I'm trying to think of what's close. I won't say it's the closest, but Iola has, I think they still have this going on. It's not a fly-in like Oshkosh or something like that, but on Fridays they all have a lunch. There's like this little group of pilots that go there on Friday noon for lunch. So that might be, something that's close. They're going to be smaller airplanes that might be easier to photograph, and they're probably going to be willing. I want to say almost all pilots are going to be willing to have their picture taken with their airplane, or the airplane, whatever. So
sure.
I don't think they have a formal name. It's something you could Google. It's something, I'm not even sure if there's a Facebook group for it anymore, but Iola Friday.
I would think, if he just even checks with his local airports, he might be able to find somebody that he could do what he's looking to do.
Oh yeah.
I sold them one of the cameras, and they're big cameras and they're big wet plates. So, you're going way back in time, probably more closer to what the Wright brothers had for flying.
Yeah,
but his stuff is really interesting. One day we're going to have him on, because it's what he does is an old time type of photography. But that gives them some ideas.
Yeah, the smaller airports are going to have better access or easier access without too much security. You get to some of the bigger airports, you can get access, go to the FBO and talk and tell them what you want and things like that, and they can get you lined up with somebody probably.
Yeah. No, okay. And Stan Zaduma was saying, does the rubber lens hood help with reflection? Then you sort of covered that already, that
I will
yeah.
say, I think it's Hoya that makes one that is only, this curved one is big. It's 12 inches in diameter.
Yeah.
maybe. But Hoya makes one by filter size. And the other one, the curved one, is one where it's stretchable. So it goes over your lens, whichever size it is.
Oh,
But I got a
okay.
couple
Yeah.
of Hoya ones that the rubber only sticks out a couple, get my fingers up there, a couple of inches, but it's really sturdy rubber. So with something like that, you can put it up against a window, and even if you're going a little sideways, it's got enough rigidity that it's going to keep the reflections away.
Yeah. I used to I had an RB67, and that hood filter size was nice, and it was a bigger hood, so it was able to press up against glass a little easier. But that's an old time film camera, and I just happened to have the hood still floating around, and it was like a 72 millimeter filter size, so it fit a lot of lenses. Hey, great. Looks like I've got all the questions that people had. Anybody else have any questions? Speak up. Yeah, Clint, go ahead.
Hey, I got a question for you, Jim. I
Mhm.
also do the photography, at the EAA. I put my website in the chat. But I want to ask you is, with the glare and the reflection off the windows, I was thinking about trying a circle polarizer. I'm not quite sure if that would help out. I know sometimes it depends what type of glass. You can get some weird, some of the cars have weird head-ups display and that, so you get a different reflection, but I don't think you'd get the same reflection problems with the aircraft. So I thought maybe a circle polarizer might work.
That's a good idea. I think if you were shooting, if your goal was to shoot a picture like forward to show the cockpit and the pilots from behind and something like that, that's a good
Yes.
idea. In my case, trying to shoot air to air, another airplane, I've thought about that at times. I even thought about if I wasn't shooting through glass, but shooting through the open baggage door. But the problem being a polarizer works on diffracted light, or is it diffracted? It's bounced light.
Yeah.
So that it would, like in my head anyway, the sky would be deep blue. A lot of times, well, put it this way, if we were going in a straight line, it might work. But so many times the work that I'm doing, we find it easier to do circles because otherwise you can end up, 100 miles from home, and then you got to fly all the way back again. So we do a lot of circles and try to stay over an area to close by that's safe. So as we do that circle, in theory, in my head, the sky is going to be blue for some of it, but then it's going to end up lightening and then darkening again as your angle to the sun is different. So that's why I never use that one.
And you're right, it does always keep changing, and I always have to adjust, and always rotate, the circle polarizer. But you're correct, when you keep going around, it's always changing, from dark to light,
And it's funny is sometimes you got to hear yourself talk because and you just said the answer, you got to change it. And so in my head, it's like I never used one because I'd have to change it. It's like, how hard is it as I turn around and shoot something to change it a little bit? It sometimes the easiest things are the hardest things to do. And I'm just seeing like, why didn't I do this years ago? Why didn't I it's a dial. You just rotate the front of it. It would have been so easy.
Yeah. But one extra thing to think about while you're hanging on by an edge of an airplane door. So, any other questions, anybody?
I just wanted to say, your photographs, your air-to-air photos, some of them have this romantic look that reminds me of the Revell and Monogram model kit boxes. One time I met an illustrator for, I believe it was Monogram, and they have that kind of idealistic, kind of glorified romantic look to them. some of the ones that you showed had that characteristic. Really impressive.
Thanks, I appreciate that. You know, one thing, if you guys ever get a chance to do air to air or, but it probably works for other things too, is if you look at 99% of my pictures, you'll never see a horizon line unless I'm shooting a wide angle lens to really give an environmental kind of look to it. Is I never show a horizon line. I'm always up into the clouds and down, and all you see is the ground. But it's never straight across. And the other thing is I never shoot, if I can help it, over roads, especially like east of Lake Winnebago. Everything is on section lines. It's nothing but this series of squares. And I try never to show distracting things like that. If it's a farm or, you know, I try not to show a lot of houses, a lot of farms, maybe one, if it's especially an antique airplane, one farm with a red barn that looks like it fits that era is good, but I try for everything as clean as possible.
Yeah. No, and it takes a really good pilot to fly you for all that air-to-air stuff.
Yeah, I was lucky to get, his name is Bruce Moore, and we got hooked up, I think in like 1991. And he had the perfect photo plane, but he's also a photographer. And we just clicked, and he kind of, especially after working 30 some years with him, 99% of the time he's looking out, he knows what I'm thinking, and he'll put the plane where I want it without me even asking, because he still has that photographer's eye and knows what I'm going to be looking for.
Yeah, that helps. It helps so much when you're doing some of that stuff. I done some air to ground, just aerial work, and just finding a good pilot to fly me for that stuff and knowing what I sort of need and how he needs to fly the plane for me really helped. And I ended up having to get a little picky sometimes at some of the airports that I used, and but once I found somebody, it was great because he knew exactly what I needed and how to get the plane into the right attitude for what I needed to photograph. But yeah, so great. Anybody else have anything other than if not, thank you so much. I really appreciate you doing this, coming on. It was very interesting. I knew you had, when I saw your website and stuff, I go, and everybody go look at his website. He's got great photos there. A lot of different things that he shoots. So it's great to have you come on, talk about that, talk a little bit about Sigma lenses. I think everybody's found a lot of interesting info from you today. So thank you very much.
And thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you.
It was a great time.
So everyone, thank you for coming today on this nice, hopefully it's getting nice outside. I don't know. It's getting up there in temperature. Next month we have, I think it's Mike Mazul on volcano photography, if I remember right. Getting to the point, we got so many of these broken out.
That's kind of hard to keep
let's see,
track. There's such great information that we have.
Where did it go here? March, yeah, Mark Mazul. Oh, and I really should push one more thing is Jennifer Renwick and David Kingham with our March seminar coming up next weekend. If you haven't signed up, please sign up. It's on the WACO website, so we really appreciate you if you sign up. It's going to be a great seminar on abstracts in landscape and black and white processing of landscape photography. So again, thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you next month.